Hello and welcome back to another Warlords of Draenor video. Today I'm going to be showing you the revamped Upper Blackrock Spire. Now this is currently in beta, so it's not 100% done, and while I was on a level 92 character, I was scaled up to 100 and to a item level of 600. The rest of the people in the group were actually on level 100 premates that had their item levels scaled down to 600. Now this appears to be the normal mode dungeon, but scaled up quite a bit. Of course, they're still very early on in the balancing process. Now, one of the cool things about this instance is that it is, of course, a revamp, and unlike some of the Cataclysm revamps, I actually have really enjoyed this one. Okay, yeah, the Cataclysm ones were fine, but there's just something about this that feels refined and a lot of fun. As you can see, it implements the new scenario sort of UI to just tell you what the crack is and give you your various objectives and things like that. And it works pretty well. Now, the group that I was in was overall actually pretty good. In fact, we had a raider from Method in our group, your man Sparkogs, I think he's on YouTube. So yeah, go check him out, he's an awesome warlock. Anyway, so our group was really solid, and okay, we had a few wipes, but in general, it was very easy to work things out, and overall, quite an enjoyable dungeon run. Now, the initial trash is really fine. Basically, we have to disable these 5 runes, and each rune's got a trash pack around it, so you kill the trash pack. Now, the trash packs themselves have got just basic, basic enough guys in them, but the grunts will do this ability where they essentially start casting, and you see this red circle, and the red circle will get larger and larger and larger. And when he finishes the cast, anything within that red circle will be aggroed. That's, of course, pretty bad if your packs are really close together. Now, you can do a few different things. You can, of course, interrupt that, or you can just pull the trash away so that the red circle will never intersect with any other groups of ads. There's also some mages which do some, little nuke thingy that I think I stood in at one point, but listen, the trash is fine. Anyway, so with this trash killed, we just move on to the next boss, which is in fact located in essentially the exact same room as one of the bosses in the original Upper Blackrock Spire. Alright then, so here we are in the first boss's room. Now, to actually engage the encounter, what you need to do is click on these little lightning conduit thingy-majigs, and that will free the boss and activate the fight. These are actually used in the boss fight as well, and as I said earlier, this is a room that you'll certainly recognize from the original incarnation of the raid, or dungeon. So as for the boss itself, well, it really is quite simple. He spawns in the middle of the room, as you can see there. And from time to time, you'll notice that he empowers those conduits that we clicked on earlier, and when he empowers one of them, he will take 14% less damage. Of course, we don't want that to happen, so we need to click on the conduits to disable them. Now, when a conduit's active, he will also start to do another ability. Now, this ability will basically just do an AoE around him. Of course, we, again, don't want that to happen, so just keep on clicking on those. Also, if multiple conduits are up, lightning balls will travel between them, and that will, of course, damage anyone within that. However, we really didn't have any problems with this. As it turns out, our group was just really proactive with dealing with that problem, and I suppose it is rather useful having a method raider in your group. So he does one or two other little things as well. There's a spell called Shrapnel Nova that he puts on the ground. You don't want to stand into it, because guess what? Shrapnel, really bad. You don't want it in your face. And then finally, he does this thing that actually just happened to me there on the screen, where a spike appears on the floor, and essentially that'll do about 60,000 damage, and there's this little Nova thingy around it. Well, if you walk into that Nova, it'll just start to push you out. As you can see there, it's really just designed to make it a little bit harder to traverse the room and click on the conduits. But still, as long as you're on the ball, then the conduits should not be much of a problem. Now, the abilities I listed off there are really, some of them I didn't particularly notice during the fight. I was just bringing those off, well, getting the information off the dungeon journal. And essentially, it just comes down to the very simple fact of clicking the conduits, don't stand in any of the bad stuff, and that is basically it. It's not a very hard fight, but honestly, it's a very fun fight. So with him killed, let's move on to the next trash. So this trash is actually really kind of simple. You have these big dudes, right, and what they do is a cleave, so you don't want to stand close to each other, because if you stand, say, right beside the tank, then they'll cleave you. You don't want that to happen. The other thing they do is they fire off this, big, fire lava thingy from the floor in front of them, so once again, you just don't want to stand in that. It's simple enough trash, but their mechanics are actually involved in the next boss fight. Alright then, so time for this boss fight. It's actually not that bad. The boss actually spawns with 2 of those big adds that we saw beforehand, so you just want to deal with them in the same way. Don't clump up, and don't stand in the fire that they throw out in front of them. It really is pretty simple in that regard. So with those 2 guys killed, what of course we want to do is, kill the boss himself. And the boss's abilities are really not particularly problematic, you just need to be on top of them. So first of all, he has this big scary nuke. It's a channel and it does 30k damage a second to the target. And this really does start to melt down your tank, and obviously you don't want that happening. All you really need to do is interrupt the channel. It's just nice and easy. Okay, so next he does something called Rejuvenating Serum, and this will actually heal him up quite a bit. Of course, that's another thing we don't want to happen, and I'm pretty sure this can be purged from the boss. I know I didn't do it myself with Drag Shot, but I know that that was our plan, and it worked, so you just purge that. Then another thing that he does is essentially just sort of, he blows green goo everywhere. You just don't stand in the goo and you're fine. Now on heroic difficulty, there was one, this isn't heroic here, but on the Dungeon Journal, heroic difficulty was listed, and he had this ability called Toxic, it was called a Salve of Toxic Fumes, and what this would do is it would hit a player, and it would do 20,000 damage a second to that player and anyone nearby. So obviously, just, stay away from your allies, and overall, you'll be fine. The boss itself's actually still pretty fun. You've got to regularly move out of those green blobs because they do spawn pretty regularly and they will hit you and they deal a decent amount of damage per second. There's things to look out for in terms of interrupt, and in general I think it's pretty well designed, especially for just a regular mode dungeon. I think that heroic ability should really add some, just, more sort of interesting gameplay to the fight, but for normal, this is really solid. Okay, so after that boss is killed, we then move on and just clear out some trash. You end up in that arena in Upper Blackrock Spire, and you just need to kill 3 waves of adds. None of them are very hard, and once that's done, the next boss will spawn in the arena. Alright then, time for the 3rd boss, who is Commander Tharbek. This guy really isn't too bad either, actually. He's a decent enough fight. So, he starts off on his Sky Reaver, and basically he bought that from the Blizzard store before we got started. Anyway, so it just does your regular run-of-the-mill stuff. There's a breath attack, and he puts some poison goo on the floor. Also, a few adds come in, but they're really not too much of a problem. So yeah, the start of this fight really isn't too bad. There's a little bit of a bug at the minute with those poison, blobs though. They don't really sort of work with some of the textures, but that's all stuff that will be sorted. So after the Chimera phase of this fight is killed, he is on the ground, and once he's on the ground, he just has a regular run-of-the-mill damaging ability that does a 6-second bleed, so the tank will have to deal with that. But then he also will charge into people, knock them back a bit, do some damage. That's again completely fine. He then also has an ability which throws a spinning axe at you. It's basically just like the Ravager from the General Nazgûl fight in the Siege of Orgrimmar. He also has an Enrage, and I'm not too sure if that can be tracked or anything. I didn't particularly check, but I mean, hey, this is just a rough little alpha preview. Overall though, the boss was decently fun. There just wasn't a great deal going on. I mean, it would maybe be spiced up by you getting whacked by him. That's really it though. I was just standing there making sure I didn't walk into the Ravagers. It definitely feels like it could use 1 or 2 more mechanics, and I suppose that's the whole point of this being the normal mode scaled up to 100 and not the heroic mode. Obviously, when this goes into heroic and it's got 1 or 2 more mechanics, then I think it could actually be a really interesting fight. I love those fights where you're dealing with just one big powerful warrior who's, throwing axes around the place, and I think they could certainly make it a lot of fun. Anyway, let's move on to the next part of the dungeon. So we actually technically went the wrong way, and we found this Corehound guy. Now, he's not actually a boss, he's got a boss-like amount of health, and essentially all he does is he sort of kites fire, so you just don't want to stand in the fire, the room fills up, you kill him, and well, we didn't get anything from killing him, but perhaps this is some sort of optional boss that they might, add in some loot for or something like that in the future. I don't know, I just thought it was cool, and I'd show it to you. Anyway, let's move on to the next boss. Alright then, time for the 4th boss. Now this guy actually is one of my favourite bosses in this instance. I think it's really awesome. As you can see, it's a dragon, and the dragon starts off being at, just the side of the bridge, facing you like that. So what happens is, his sort of initial ability is just that little fire, circle that you see in the floor. You don't want to stand on that for, frankly, rather obvious reasons. The next thing he does is, as you just saw, a breath. So he will basically choose one side of the bridge and then breathe from that side to the other side. We decided to stand in the middle so that we would have enough time to realize where he was breathing from and then move to the safe area. Obviously, I was a hunter, so it wasn't particularly troublesome. Anytime that it got, you know, sort of hairy, I was just able to use deterrence, or not deterrence, disengage, and it was completely fine. So after you do that, he flies up in the air and he starts bombarding everyone. Now, I thought this was oddly inconsistent. I saw the spell effect on the floor, like the swirly thing, and sometimes I felt like I was being hit when I was not in it. I'm not 100% sure what was going on there, though the raid as a whole, or the group even as a whole, was taking a decent amount of damage. So while that's going on, a whole bunch of ads will spawn. They're just these little whelps. They don't do anything special, but it's extra damage on the tank, and we don't want that because a dead tank usually means a dead raid. Or dead group. So anyway, yeah, the DPS just sort of melt them down, and it's fine. And while you're dealing with those, there will be a little bit of overlap, so you'll have to deal with the boss doing his big fire breath, and then also all the little mini whelps just being generally rather annoying. But to be honest, that is essentially the entire fight. You just have to deal with these guys. Now, as the fight goes on, he gets stacks of something called Burning Rage, and each stack supposedly increases his damage by 40%, so you do want to kill him as soon as possible. Once again, I didn't really notice during the fight, and the reason for that is because I didn't get that much time to read up the dungeon journal. I know I should have done that beforehand, but I think, honestly, that in this fight, just going in and learning the mechanics by reacting to them was decent enough. In this situation here, I actually stood in the fire. Look, there was just so many things on the floor I didn't really notice. Still, though, this is a really, really fun fight. And you'll notice that it actually pushed our group to the limit a little bit at the end. We lost 2 guys. I think it was me and the 3 DPSers actually survived, or maybe it was me and... I'm pretty sure the healer died anyway. Or maybe it was the tank. Whatever. We had some deaths, but we were still able to pull it through and kill the boss. Anyway, really fun fight, and yeah, let's just move on to the next one. Alright then, time for the final boss. Now this one is actually Warlord Zayla, who was the person who was, I think, riding Galakras all the way back in the Siege of Orgrimmar. And yeah, this time we actually get to properly kill her, which is certainly quite a nice thing. And the fight itself is, I suppose, pretty fun, though it definitely feels like it's lacking 1 or 2 mechanics. Again, though, this is the normal version. I'd imagine that the heroic one could be a great deal of fun. So the main thing that she will do is fixate on a target, and she'll fixate on you, then she'll start spinning around, and of course she'll be following you. So while she's fixating, you don't want to, say, kite her through the healer or do something dumb like that, which is, not a good thing to do. So that's the main mechanic that she does. Another one is called Rebounding Blade. She essentially just throws an axe at you. This axe will do a little bit of damage, but then it will also bounce to 2 nearby targets. That is, of course, if you are close to 2 nearby targets. So ideally, as long as you're spread out, Rebounding Blade will only hit 1 person, and that's just a way to ensure that, you're efficiently managing that. So that is essentially the first half of the fight dealt with. Once she gets to 50% health, she fecks off for a bit, a whole bunch of ads come in, and then you start getting into the more tricky part of the fight. And I say tricky loosely, I mean it's still pretty simple to deal with. So a bunch of ads come in. The only major mechanic they do is a chain that pulls you into them, and as well as the ads that spawn, a whole bunch of drakes will start to appear at various sides of the room. Now, you don't need to kill these or anything like that. Basically, one will appear at a corner, it'll do a fire breath, which affects you within the room, and then it will relocate and do another fire breath, relocate, rinse and repeat. It just keeps on doing that. So obviously, you don't want to stand in the fire. And originally when I was doing this, I just kind of waited to react to the fire. Then I noticed it was actually coming from the drakes, and once I noticed that, I, just look at where the drake was and then move. It was really quite simple. So after the ads are dealt with, Zayla comes back, and mechanically she's the exact same. You just have to deal with both her and the fire-breathing drakes. Though overall, it really is rather simple. This is once again one of those fights that just feels like it's missing 1 or 2 mechanics, though I'd say that this actually could be a really cool fight. What I would love to see is perhaps some sort of mechanic where the room, like you're basically on this platform that's suspended above lava, so if parts of that platform could start to break off, then it would reduce the space that you have to get rid of, or, to get away from the breaths, and then also reduce the space that you would have to kite her while she does her little spinny thingy. I think if they did that, it would just, be the cherry on top of the cake in terms of this boss fight. So overall, what do I think of the Upper Blackrock Spire Revamp? Well, it's a lot of fun, actually. Right now, the bosses are mechanically interesting enough. There's not a great deal going on, but for a normal dungeon at level 100, I'm certainly quite happy with it, and I can definitely say that I actually had a blast while I was going through here, especially with the 4th boss, who was just an absolute joy. Flying around the place, spewing fire down on you and really causing a good bit of a rumpus. Anyway, so that's really it for the video. Do let me know what you think in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for all the latest Warlords of Draenor content. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.